countdown to the U.S. election day on November 3rd has begun, but due to COVID, the results may take a while to be announced. China warns Ottawa over granting asylum to Hong Kongese protesters in Canada. Turkish President Erdogan fans the flames of religious intolerance. Armenia and Azerbaijan ceasefire collapse within hours. COVID-19 restrictions tighten further in Europe amid second wave of infections. RSS chief Mohan Bhagwat called Indian Muslims the most content. More mosques stand tall in India than in most Islamic nations. Israel celebrated World Food Day. Saudi Arabia and Gulf states call for a boycott of Turkey. The U.S. election day on November 3rd is expected to see more mail-in ballots than ever. Political commentators are speculating that President Donald Trump, who has been critical of the absentee voting, might claim victory on election night despite any unfinished voting count. This may be especially relevant to states like Pennsylvania and Michigan that have little or no advance counting of mail-in ballots. Early voting counts are showing a high level of civic participation. Before the election day, tens of millions of ballots have already been cast by enthusiastic voters that are making sure that the vote is counted even amid a pandemic. Democrats are hoping this energy leads to a decisive victory on November 3rd. Registered Democrats are outvoting Republicans by large margins in states that provide partisan breakdowns of early ballots. Republicans, however, are also more likely to tell pollsters that they intend to vote in person, and the GOP is counting on an overwhelming share of Election Day votes going to President Trump. A top Chinese diplomat has warned Canada against granting asylum to Hong Kong democracy protesters, adding that doing so could jeopardize the health and safety of Canadians living in the southern Chinese financial hub. The remarks by Song Peiwu, Beijing's Ottawa envoy, came in response to reports suggesting that Hong Kong couple who took part in last year's protests have been granted refugee status.
Certainly, it will embolden those violent criminals. So if the Canadian side really cares about the stability and the prosperity in Hong Kong, and really cares about the good health and the safety of those 300,000 Canadian passport holders in Hong Kong, and a large number of Canadian companies operating in Hong Kong SAR. You should support those efforts to fight violent crimes, those efforts to make sure that the one country, two systems is more steadily and comprehensively implemented in Hong Kong. And that is exactly what the national security law in Hong Kong SAR is meant to be. So I would like to suggest that people here take an objective and fair view of what's happening in Hong Kong, and to make sure not to interfere in those domestic affairs of China, so as to prevent further damage to our bilateral relationship.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau hits back at China in retaliation to the threat. We will stand up loudly and clearly for human rights all around the world, whether it's talking about the situation faced by the Uyghurs, whether it's talking about the very concerning situation in Hong Kong, whether it's calling out China for its coercive diplomacy.
As a government, we've been very, very clear that we will stand up for Canadian interests, and we will stand up loudly and clearly for human rights all around the world, whether it's talking about the situation faced by the Uyghurs, whether it's by talking about the very concerning situation in Hong Kong, whether it's calling out China for its coercive diplomacy. These are things we will continue to do. We will make sure that China knows that not only are we standing up for human rights and calling on a safe return of the two Michaels who've been arbitrarily detained, but we stand with allies around the world, from the United States to Australia to Great Britain to European nations to many nations in every corner of the world who share these concerns. We don't look to escalate, but we will continue to ensure that Canadians know we're standing up for our rights, for our principles, for our values, and mostly, we continue to stand up.
Christians and other religious minorities are being blamed for bringing COVID-19 to Turkey, where a series of attacks on churches is sparking fear amongst believers. International Christian Concern, a United States-based advocacy group, contends Turkey's media is mostly state-run and is frequently posting hate speech directed towards Christians, Jews, and other religious minorities. These instances of hate speech are often linked to an increase of persecution incidences.
Over the past year, the Commission has become increasingly concerned about Turkey's persecution of Christians and other religious minorities, concerns that have only been exacerbated by the pandemic.
A ceasefire between Azerbaijan and Armenia fell through hours after coming into effect, with both sides accusing each other of violations. Hundreds of people have been killed since the worst fight in decades erupted between the two countries over the breakaway region in Nagorno-Karabakh 3 weeks ago. According to the European Centre for Disease Prevention and Control, more than 200,000 people have now lost their lives to the coronavirus in Europe and in the UK. The number of infections is now approaching 5 million. Europe has been fighting a second wave of the deadly coronavirus, with the governments favoring local measures to national lockdowns. Ireland became the first European country to announce a return to a full lockdown. A raft of new restrictions also came into force in Italy on Monday. Restaurants now have to display their maximum capacity outside and close doors by midnight, while bars have to close at 6 p.m. if they don't have table service. Indian Muslims are the most content in the world, RSS chief Mohan Bhagwat said, while asserting that people from all faiths have stood together whenever it has been about the essence of India. He also said any kind of bigotry and separatism are spread only by those with self-interest. Bhagwat suggests that in India's history, people from all faiths have stood together whenever there was an attack on the country's culture.
हम हैं मुसलमान, लेकिन हम अरब नहीं हैं, हम तुर्क नहीं हैं, हम भारत हैं। और भारत है ऐसा कहना, और हम विशेष है ऐसा अगर कहना है आपको, तो भारत है यानी क्या है, इसका विचार करना पड़ता है। और इसका जब जब विचार करते हैं तब ये ध्यान में आता है कि भारत है यानी हिंदू है।
More than 300,000 mosques stand tall in India, a lot more than the number of mosques in most Islamic nations. Here's a special report from Shweta Vijay from ANI.
Considered as one of the most popular Muslim pilgrimage centers, the Dargah of Ajmer Sharif houses the tomb of Khwaja Moinuddin Chishti, a holy saint who dedicated his entire life to the service of the poor and downtrodden. Today, the Dargah is visited by millions of devotees every year, irrespective of their caste and religion, making it an epitome of communal harmony.
Situated in the heart of Ajmer city in Rajasthan, at the foot of a barren hill, the Dargah of Ajmer Sharif is one of the most sanctified shrines in the country. Dedicated to the founder of Chishtiya order in India, namely Hazrat Khwaja Moinuddin Chishti or Garib Nawaz, the Dargah is venerated by the people of all religious communities.
Mashiv, Israel's agency for international development cooperation, celebrated World Food Festival. Here's a special report from Israel's Ministry of Information and Mashiv. Several media sources have been reporting that the authorities within Saudi Arabia's commercial sector have been pressuring Saudi companies to stop commercial dealings with Turkey, including boycotting Turkish products, investment, and tourism to the country. Relations between Saudi Arabia and Turkey have soured in recent years due to the conflicting positions taken by both the countries on a number of issues, ranging from Ankara's support of the Arab Spring to the backing of Qatar in the face of the decision by Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, and Egypt to boycott the tiny Gulf state in June 2017. Tensions increased following the assassination of Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi in the Saudi consulate in Istanbul on October 2, 2018. Last month, the UAE and Bahrain, two of Saudi Arabia's closest allies, officially signed the U.S.-brokered agreement in Washington to normalize relations with Israel. Observers believe that there is a link between the semi-official Saudi campaign to boycott Turkish products and the informal reconciliation between Saudi Arabia and Israel, which may encourage the import of Israeli goods into the Saudi market through Bahrain and the UAE. Thank you for watching. I'm Julia Cosby.